I'm actually on a mission to start an unspoken Halloween decor competition between my neighbours. The goal is that I want people to look in utter terrified jealousy at my porch and be like, I could do that. And then they can't, and I win. I win Halloween. We've officially cut the ribbon on the season that is most defined by derivative scenes, usually revolving around masked serial killers and final girls. To celebrate the most wonderful time of year, I wanted to go ahead and craft some outdoor Halloween decorations for the first time in my life. I've done indoor ones before, back in kindergarten, but I've never done outdoor. I've spent most of my adult life living in apartments, so now with the luxury of a yard, I'm very excited to scare my neighbours. Unfortunately, I think that this year I probably only have the time to make 1 or 2 big outdoor Halloween decorations that I'll add to over the coming years, so expect this video to recur. But this year, the concept that I was most excited by was the Pumpkin Sentinels by Pumpkin Rock. I've seen these floating around the internet for years. I think they're super, super cool. Oh, my real voice. And of course, my main reason for wanting to try these was that I don't necessarily think the real kick out of owning a bunch of Pumpkin Sentinels comes from putting them in your yard in October. The real kick comes from hanging them up in your garage all year round and spooking the crap out of your partner every time he goes in to get his motorcycle out. Yeah. And that's the real point of Halloween decorations. It's not about October. It's about people thinking that you might be secretly a serial killer whenever they see your storage space, full of dead bodies and what looks like Aragog's cousins. Anyway, the first step in creating this was to carve a pumpkin. But this time I decided not to carve it out of a real pumpkin or a pre-made foam pumpkin, but to attempt to make my own. And honestly, I don't recommend this unless you have access to a beach ball, which weirdly enough for an Australian, I don't own one. I'm just gonna say my pumpkin looks a little sad. Now that the Yellow Pages is obsolete, I was able to use that for my paper mache, and that is a wild fact to know. Between layers of paper mache, I also added joint compound mixed with PVA glue. This is called Monster Mud, and this helps with waterproofing any paper mache based craft that you want to put outdoors. P.S. Don't worry, the pumpkin did not continue to look quite this sad. Once I had a general pumpkin shape I felt that I could work with, I cut a hole in the base to rip my grocery bags out. I then used a marker to create a rough guideline of the type of pumpkin face I wanted and cut this out with a box cutter. Now, because I wasn't fully happy with the shape of my pumpkin here, I decided to add more layers to him to make him a little bit more Burton-esque and repulsive. I built up the base and the lovely pumpkin lumps with foil and tape, and then I paper mache'd over these. I added a much longer, thicker stalk to the top of the pumpkin and some wrinkled veins or vines and heavy eyelids and brows to make everything look a little bit more menacing. Once I was finished, I painted the entire structure with the joint compound and PVA glue mixture, and I threaded some red lights through the inside. To ensure the glowing lights looked more like they were emanating from within the pumpkin as opposed to just being fairy lights around the pumpkin or inside the pumpkin, I sprayed expanding foam inside the structure. Make sure you pull your lights as close as you can to the front of the face holes while doing this, just don't let them pop outside of the face holes, because expanding foam does let light pass through, but not when it's more than a few centimeters thick and not when it gets that sort of skin on top of it. I then cut the expanding foam down to form flatter surfaces, and I roughly brushed black paint over it all to create a more sinister look, kind of like burning coals. I constructed a stand for the Sentinel out of scrap wood. I wanted mine to stand about 8 feet tall, so I put together a few blocks of wood using a combination of PVA glue and screws. I created a square base to dig down into the ground and cover with sandbags and soil to give the Sentinel some more sturdiness. Holy shit, S words. Alright, fine. My boyfriend did this. He doesn't trust me anymore because I wrecked a drill bit a couple weeks ago and I am chaos. I then painted it all black to help it blend in during the dark. During the dark? During the night? During the night times? When the sun goes down. To construct the skeleton, I began by creating a cross shape out of 4 pieces of PVC pipe cut in half. It took me a long time to cut these because I decided that I didn't want to go outside and get the handsaw. These were fixed into a T-shaped fitting and screwed into place. Okay, here is what I've done so far. I added these ribs, these are both 24 inches on each side, screwed in at the front and at the back. This one I didn't measure, but it's just an arch screwed into the back of these ribs and duct taped here. The next step is we put on these little side joiny bits and hot glue them in, and then create a clavicle and more rib. My camera is charging. This is where I'm at. Then it was time to make the rib cage. So the ribs were made of what I think is some kind of hosing. I got it from the garden section, not the piping section at the hardware store. Wow, the fact that there's a piping section at the hardware store still cracks me up because I'm 12. It's soft and malleable and I could literally cut through this stuff with scissors. I paper mache'd over the rib cage, being sure to drape the paper between the ribs to give it that sunken in corpse-like look. And then to create the arms, I used thick tie wire. So by the way, not a single person at the hardware store knew what tie wire was when I asked. It's like they've never gardened. I thought I had the name wrong and then I looked at the price tag and it said tie wire. Anyway, if you need it, look in the landscaping part of your local garden section at the hardware store and you're looking for the kind of thickness you think you could use to train roses to grow over your porch. You don't want the flimsy stuff, but you don't want it to be too thick. So I built some dodgy looking arms and some dodgy looking legs, and the idea was that they should look like vines. I then added some foil for thickness and a paper towel for hip bones. Well, a paper towel roll. The innards of a paper towel. Then I crafted some hands and feet, and then I paper mache'd the best I could over this whole form using tissue paper from the toilet section at the supermarket. And also other paper. Basically any paper in my house was fair game at this point. I like the toilet paper though because it gave a very skin-like texture. Oh hey people, look at my very cool hair. I'm trying to look very cool right now. You can't see anything. Ow. I started weightlifting again. It hurts. Here is where I am up to with this wonderful, fun project. We're getting to the home stretch now. Pretty much all I have to do is finish up the painting, which is the coolest and most fun. What I did to get it to this stage was after I finished paper macheing, I wrapped a whole bunch of cling wrap around all of the vines and vine-like limbs, as we may call them in the biz. Then I proceeded to run my heat gun over that to heat shrink them so that they stuck really tightly to the paper mache. And then from there I mixed up some pretty lax PAX paint, which is acrylic paint mixed with latex. The latex allows the paint to bind pretty directly to the plastic from the saran wrap, and that gives you also a little bit of an extra layer of waterproofing because this is an outdoor Halloween decoration. After the PAX paint layer, I used blacks, purples, browns and green in my airbrush, regular acrylic paint and Plastidip, all to keep painting the skeleton to get a plant-like appearance. And then I realized something. I never showed you all how I painted the pumpkin. The footage exists somewhere in the depths of my phone, but I cannot find it. Let it be known that I used acrylic paint in oranges, greens, browns and blacks. Then it was time to assemble. We dug a little hole in the ground next to the garden path and placed the pumpkin sentinel in there. Then, while my boyfriend sandbagged it, I did a final few touches with the black Plastidip and I attempted to not get any in his hair, because that would not have been good. All jokes aside, this was a very fun project and I'm very proud of my little pumpkin. I think he looks really cool, particularly at night, particularly with red and blue spotlights on him. It's very, very fun. My goal really was that there's like a little pathway that goes right around the house that I live in. And my goal really was that I would eventually hear passers-by, because you can sometimes hear their conversations. I wanted to hear them look at the pumpkin and go, oh my god, what is that? Ew, I don't want to walk past here, mum. I want to scare children away from my yard. That has yet to happen, and I'm honestly quite sad about it, but maybe next year I'll make an even scarier pumpkin, and I will get that effect eventually.